And the theme of our next newsletter is going to be high school, implementing strength conditioning into high school. So we're meeting with a lot of strength conditioning types from the high school environments. And this is one of the first interviews we're doing because this is the most important person I could think of interviewing in the high school setting, of course. And this is Marcello Campanaro. Welcome to the podcast, sir. So for those who you don't know, Marcello, we call him Campy, and he's been around forever. He's about 2 years older than Dirt, and he was a head of physical education at M.M. Robinson High School in Burlington, Ontario. He took a bit of a leave while he's doing that. He was a head football coach at McMaster University, and he's just been a meathead for probably 30, 40 years now, lifting weights. So I'm going to go through a series of questions here today. I'm going to let him tell us a little bit about his journey and how he developed strength conditioning at his high school. The big theme of this newsletter is looking at the high school setting and the youth strength conditioning in Canada. How do we go about accessing the youth population for strength conditioning services so we can create the best athletes we can create in this country? And obviously the high schools is a major component of that. So hopefully by the end of this talk, we'll get a better idea, some clarity on how we do implement strength conditioning better in that high school setting. So Campy, welcome. Tell me about yourself. Tell me a little bit about your history. How did you work your way up? What got you the bug of lifting weights? That kind of thing, because you're no spring chicken, my man.
No, thanks for having me. No, I'm not a spring chicken. And I just gained a year today, so
it's your birthday
anyway,
today.
we're still moving along.
What a way to celebrate.
Yeah, doing a podcast interview, whatever you're calling it.
No, I don't know.
Reflecting, that's a good time to reflect is the birthday.
Right. All right. Should I ask? How old?
59.
Oh, that's daunting.
Still going.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
All right, so tell me, when did it all start? Were you one of these kids who got bitten by the bug early, or did you just kind of pick it up later?
Oh yeah.
Meathead, right?
So I started when I was 12 years old. I was running a weight set. Saw the old Joe Weider barbells, couple weights.
And 1973. I'm doing math. 73. They didn't even have barbells back then, I didn't think.
No, they had a bar and those smaller, non-standardized hole for the weights, real McCoys. Foundry there. I think they have that Foundry's in Hamilton somewhere. Yeah. But anyway, got that from a Sports Illustrated article on a guy that was in prison doing deadlifts or whatever. I thought that was pretty neat. I didn't quite understand what he was doing, but because I want weights, so kind of started there. And then like involvement, muscle fitness, all that kind of stuff in terms of magazine reading. And I was brought down to the Y by a friend in Hamilton, and I was 14 at the time, and went in and says, I think I want to be here. So I got a membership and lied about my age so I could be there every day and get cranking away. And the Y at that time was full of cops and criminals and old school wrestlers. So it was kind of a interesting place to start off.
Hamilton, right?
Yeah, the old YMCA. And they had a little, they had one area sort of main kind of fitnessy type weightlifting, and then they had a little powerlifting room and up down there. But it was a good environment for me. The cops kind of kept me in line in terms of what I was doing outside of there, and the wrestlers kind of gave me program, which was pretty simple and pretty straightforward, and it wasn't anything you wouldn't use today. It was like 6 to 8 exercises. Here, do this, shove them down, and away they went from there. and at that point in time too, it was kind of before they put in all sort of, I guess, inclusivity requirements in terms of hiring for cops. So they were all just huge, massive lifters, like, 6 feet plus, 220 plus, all just down there pounding away, and then they went to work and whatever. But that was kind of the starting point, and then, through there, I just kind of continued lifting and more and more and more, and then away we went, and kind of started training a bit for bodybuilding competitions. And then when I was 17, I was interviewed by a spectator because I was training, and then one of the questions at that time that came up was, what do you want to do with this down the road? And when I was 17, I said I wanted to be a strength conditioning coordinator, national, so the dream was pretty big. But anyway, I think there was probably none in Canada at the time. But I'd seen that there were people doing that in the States, like as a career, and it was football guys. And then the other guys were track guys, and those two areas probably had most influence in terms of directing me in that sense, because there never ever really saw much else at the time in other sports that was tied in with strength conditioning. Football seemed to do it pretty quick, and track seemed to have done it all the time, in terms of having that integration of strength training and performance. Anyway, it ended up going to McMaster in phys ed degree at the time, kind of contrary to what my father would have liked. He would have liked me to go into business. What are you going to do with phys ed degree? And sort of at that time, I was thinking strength conditioning, and didn't really start into McMaster with the thought that I would end up teaching. But at the end of the line at McMaster, there were no strength conditioning jobs, so teaching was a good way to go, and took the phys ed degree to become a phys ed specialist in terms of teaching, and then on from there.
Were you playing football at Mac?
I went.
You're playing football.
Through, I played a year, and then I got hurt. I had a neck injury, and that kind of ended that endeavor. So, onward, and really from even when I had entered Mac, I was lifting, and then it never ever stopped me from lifting. That's for sure. It just stopped me from playing football, and I got into coaching a lot more. But track and field was probably the primary thing for me at the time, and football, in terms of coaching football, was after I'd gotten a position teaching. But sort of through McMaster, I was coaching track and field at my old high school, and some pretty neat opportunities came up as a result of that too, because the kid that I coached mainly was a 6'6", 300-pound shot putter that, like, when he went to offset, kind of grabbed eyes and that kind of thing. And next thing, the throws coach at University of Toronto, who was basically a national team guy, wanted him there. So we built a relationship to work with that kid, and then I went there, and they told me what to do, and I went back to Hamilton and did it, kind of thing. And anyway, that was a very good learning experience, because the throws coach was defector from Poland. I think guys would know who he is, Bogdan Poprowski. He's still in the Toronto area. I don't think he's doing much in the way of coaching anymore. But anyway, he was a fascinating guy in the sense that, one, he defected, so I think that's a big deal in terms of coming across and just leaving everything. But he was also an Olympic level coach with a PhD in biomechanics and those kind of things, and kind of see all the pieces where kind of up to that point in time, I never really put those pieces together in terms of lifting and then programming and then, skill and technique analysis, et cetera, with him. It was just like a whole new world. I thought as a coach, I was young at the time, he was brilliant, but I would still say that, at this point in time, just understanding of the whole thing and the knowledge base. And it was interesting in terms of his view of the Americans when it came to the throwing and track, and it was the Americans spent a lot less time on that sort of skill, technique development and analysis, and more time on trying to make a shot ball turn into a pea kind of thing. And, bench press and squats was the American way, and the Europeans were very, very different when it came to that piece and incorporating that into the throwing events. And I just remember a conversation where he said, one, he was in shock at what kind of talent was available in Canada, more so in the U.S., but in Canada. And he said if he had that kind of talent in Poland, he'd have medalists year in and year
So
out.
where you were, you said, so this fellow from Kiev, so we're talking early 1980s here?
Yes.
Yeah, and so
early 1980s.
So your first high school gig was where then?
It was actually at MM Robinson. I went into Robinson 87 at the end of the year for someone who had a nervous breakdown, but it wasn't in phys ed. It was in geography and anthropology and sociology at the time. My first 7 years at MM were that in terms of teaching, but I was coaching, and that's really what got me the job at MM in the first place, because that was my interview. When I came in for a couple supply days, and I survived, that was a good thing. But the next part of the deal was like, what do you coach? And I never interviewed with the principal for that job. I had a recommendation from the athletic head at the time and the geography head. And the athletic head was basically, pushing this guy will coach. And that was a time frame when guys had influence in terms of who got hired, and at least they could forward names. So anyway, I ended up there, and I was coaching football and track for the beginning, and did some hockey sessions in there, and then a little bit of basketball, but mainly it was football and track. And then I expanded the track program to indoor and outdoor. So it just basically I ran from September to June with those two programs. And about 7 years in, I finally got a phys ed section. And then by 10, I was full-time phys ed, like 6 sections in the whole thing. From sort of 10 on, you didn't really dictate what courses you got. And then about year 15, I would say, I applied for the headship, got the headship, and then that's kind of when I could control my destiny and kind of the direction of the department at the time. So kind of halfway through my career. And I think probably in this context, that's important as well, because it never really went into the headship because there was this huge stipend in terms of cash to do it. You're basically losing money in terms of the amount of time you're going to put in. But it was important for me to be able to determine the direction of athletics and the phys ed curriculum pieces and those kind of things. So that was kind of the emphasis in terms of wanting to become the department head at that time. And especially at that time because there were some work rules going on and people didn't want you doing more. So I didn't want to be in a situation where, you know, things were going backwards and I was doing less and less and less. I had some things in mind in terms of what I wanted to do there in athletics and the phys ed department, and I needed to be in that position to be able to do that, because otherwise I would never have had the opportunity, and the opportunity was there, so I took it.
So this is now late 90s, so you found the impetus to build up a strength conditioning program at your high school. How did you go about actually doing that once you were the head?
So at the school, they had a little dungeon downstairs. It was an old rifle range that they had used. They had 2 big universal monsters in there, equipment-wise, and that was about it. Not many people went down there. You know, once in a week, a fitness class went in and did some stuff. And this was before I was a department head, but I proposed to the department to basically refit the room and get some stuff out of there, get actually all of it out of there, and bring in, you know, equipment, bars, weights, all that kind of stuff. And that was big at that time, because that was basically me with an idea against what were there, 7 other department members who'd been there for 20 plus years that really didn't want anything to do with you know, lifting or anything of that nature. They were happy with the universals because they didn't have to worry about instructing or watching or anything like that. And so this was a big deal. So their feeling was that I was trying to create a gym for myself to train in, as opposed to something that, you know, would benefit the whole sort of student body. I just thought when I went in there, I'd never seen anything so archaic in my life, and it needed to change. And eventually, the department head supported the idea of turning it over. And like every time we, you know, met as a department, I kind of had to go through that scrutiny with everybody in the department in terms of what I wanted to do and spending money and all that kind of stuff. And it was a fight, you know, and you're trying to convert or convince people that this was a way to go in terms of long-term, you know, activity for someone, you know, when they graduate. We've talked about this before. We graduate, and what are you going to do with, you know, the things you learned in phys ed beyond the high school? And gymnastics was not going to be available to anybody. And not that it's not a good activity or anything like that, but that's where it ends, you know. And then there were a few other things that we were offering that as soon as high school's over, it ends. And actually, with respect to the gymnastics, it ended in, you know, grade 10. They did grade 9, grade 10 at the time. They had gymnastics as an activity, and that was the end of it. And I just looked at it again differently in the sense that, you know, if we bring this in, this is something they can take with them when they leave. There's gyms all over the place and that kind of thing, and at least give them, you know, sort of foundation or basic skill set to go ahead and kind of use those pieces when you leave. There, like I said, there's nowhere to do gymnastics when you're 18 and 19 years of age, you know, and I don't know why you would. But
so you're not the department head, though. You were able to.
No.
Department head. How about the principal? Did they have to get involved, and where did you get the money for it?
No, at that time, the principal wasn't really involved. It was the department head that kind of kept clamps on how fast and how much change went. The money was not given to me by the department. So, you know, I said it'll cost this much. And they said, well, we have bingo that you can do on Thursday nights. So you want something, there you go. Sign up for bingo. So I did that. And built up enough funds to get it started. But again, through sort of contacts and that kind of thing outside of school, and some sketchy type contacts, I had purchased a couple pieces from someone I knew from the old Champions gym that was basically the guy who took the equipment out after lease, and then they resold refurbished type stuff. Anyway, there was gym. It was a Family Fitness in Kitchener, and this guy said, I can get you a deal on equipment. Okay, so it was basically $10,000, and I could have everything that was in the gym.
Wow.
And then bring it to Robinson, which I did. But 10,000, everything in the gym meant everything in the gym. So it was a good price, but they also had one of those Commodore 64 circuits. So like big, huge 5-piece monsters or whatever. I had to take that.
Melt it
and
down,
then like I said,
a steel mill and sell it off.
Melt it. Well, it cost me $50 to get rid of it.
Yeah.
You know, but the trade-off was I got everything else. So we ended up with enough bars, enough weights, enough dumbbells, and then a lot of Nautilus pieces at the time. So, you know, leg extension and lateral raise and on and on and on. There's probably about a 10-piece Nautilus circuit that came with it. And then a couple of multi-station pull-downs in there. So, but we got equipped. And that was kind of what I wanted to do, was at least have something. And we could definitely work out and train and all that kind of stuff with what we got out of there. And then the next plan was to replace a piece, you know, kind of every sort of 6 months or yearly or whatever with something new. And then, you know, kind of that $10,000 wasn't a big benchmark in terms of getting money. But, you know, like if we'd have started, you know, trying to fill the gym from scratch with new equipment, it would have been a problem. Like I don't know where I would have come up with 50,000 or 70,000 or whatever the going rate was at the time to try and get enough equipment in there to kind of operate the way I wanted to operate. So that was, you know, again, circumstance, I guess, in a good circumstance, because it just happened to know somebody outside of the school system and was able to, I didn't have to go through a lot of channels. You know, and just when I said this was how much, and that there wasn't a time that I had to show invoices and go through purchase orders and all that kind of stuff either. So again, it was, you know, timing fortunate, you could say.
Yeah, you can't do that much anymore, right? Well, this is pre-COVID. Now,
No.
through the roof, you can't get a gym that's just trying to get rid of equipment anymore. Everybody's upselling everything. And then you have to go tendering process, I'm assuming now, is that the standard?
Yeah.
There's not usually a lot of cash floating around. Can you still do fundraising and buy things cash outside of the school, or does it all have to be approved internally now?
No, when I came to the end there was no more cash buy. And that was kind of a school-wide thing anyway. They wanted to remove any cash handling by teachers altogether. And everything you bought kind of had to be documented. Then the other part of it was they didn't want you buying used equipment for insurance purposes or liability and those kind of stuff, or warranties. Like if you can't provide a warranty a certificate on a piece of equipment, then you're not buying it, kind of thing. So, you know, a barbell, I don't know that it really needs a warranty. Barbell's a barbell, you know, maybe it bends, but kind of thing. But again, if you don't buy it new, then people have a problem with that. So, but again, fortunate in terms of timing, kind of thing. That was lucky to do that because it got us going.
So
next sort of big step was
go ahead.
Yeah, got a weight room, and then the next big step was to relocate, and we took that sort of little dungeon rifle range setup and got into one of our auxiliary gyms. So this point in time now is when I am a department head, and we used to use one of the gyms as a gymnastics gym. So it was used a month or two in a semester, and then it kind of sat empty, but the gymnastics equipment stayed up. And there was tons of equipment there, and it would, not go up and down to that. And anyway, I proposed that we go into there and then sell and get rid of all the gymnastics equipment. And that proposal I made to the principal at the time, but I had that relationship now because I was a department head, so it was interacting with the principal on a regular basis, and she was good in the sense that she basically let me do what I wanted, and just like, and meeting with her was, what do you need from me, kind of thing. And I said, I need you to allow me enough rope to hang myself, and just make sure you cut it, if I do, kind of thing. But she let me run, and she didn't really give me a lot of money, but she didn't give me any obstacles. The obstacles came again from the department, because there were teachers in the department at the time that, they had their gymnastics units set for the last 20 years, and they didn't want to change those things. Although, again, I could not see the benefit at the time when when I walked by or I looked in to see, kids sitting around trying to figure out, their tumbling routine for 2 weeks, but there was no tumbling going on. Like, there was just, just way too much sitting around for a program where you're not supposed to be sitting around. And then the other side of it was, there was an injury kind of every second semester, and we're not talking little things like a broken arm and a kid flying off a trampoline and stuff like that. Like, it became more difficult, I think, at that time to supervise. And again, maybe context, like when I went through MAC, you had to do, in your first year, you had to do a gymnastics unit, and it was geared towards teaching gymnastics and that kind of thing. Well, teachers' colleges weren't doing that anymore, and they don't do it now. So in terms of the teaching competencies, they're asking people to go in there with no gymnastics, background at all, and basically try and teach gymnastics and supervise the gymnastics. And not only now was it an issue of sort of how beneficial is this in the long term. Now it's like there's a risk factor, on both ends. Like, the teachers that were in there, if something happened on their watch, they've got no support in terms of, I went through A, B, and C progressions and all that kind of stuff. We were just, hoping and praying that nothing happened. But anyway, we got rid of that, and then ended up in a huge facility. Nobody has those facilities. I know, like, Westmount did the same thing. They took their auxiliary gym, turned it into that. But sort of space-wise, sheer square footage for a high school, that's probably, as big as it gets in terms of facility. And then that allowed, again, us to expand and do more things and make it a better, so not that size, you know, in terms of that really matters, but.
So how did your programming grow then? What was the response from students, and then the faculty, I'm assuming, eventually bought in?
Yeah, eventually what ended up happening was now grade 9 started offering more fitness units at the time, and again at the time, you know, 1 or 2 fitness units. So now they were using it. They kind of replaced the gymnastics time and replaced it with, you know, fitness center pieces there, and they started developing, you know, like grade 9, we had it was going to be orientation. So basically, you know, learn how to use the equipment that's in there, circuits, that kind of piece. And then grade 10 would be more grade 11 on. And at the same time, once we got there, I started putting together plans for what I call the high performance program there, which was basically take the personal fitness development courses and put that high performance title on them. And I tried to, and I was able to do this at the start, but segregate the clientele, I guess you could say. So we interviewed the students, and to get into that program, they had to be active athletic participants, and not just like, you know, I'm in my backyard kicking a soccer ball around, but kids that were playing rep soccer, rep hockey, rep basketball, anyone that was playing varsity sport at the school, they could sign up or enroll and take this course as an option. And kind of to appease administration, we had to make sure we were offering a general fitness program. So we split what was going on in grade 11 and offered sort of a section of this high performance, and then sections of general. And at the beginning, that was great. We had good numbers. We had kids that were athletes and kids that would benefit from, you know, a higher end, higher performance, or performance-minded type of training programs. And that was good for about 4 or 5 years. And we expanded our sections, and it was all good for a while. But things change.
So what happened? So yeah,
when
you had good buy-in, numbers are increasing, then someone
your school
showing favoritism or something. What happened?
What happens is again, they call them out of control things, but the school population starts going down. Oh. And timetabling changes, or class average sizes, like per pupil, sizes go up, and now all of a sudden, even though you have more kids, you have less sections, kind of thing. And then it turns into, when the school starts to shrink, it loses program. So guidance needs to timetable kids that don't necessarily get all the program they want, and a lot of times it's dump them into a phys ed program, dump them in, and I tried to keep that from happening in that course. But then all of a sudden we had, you know, 3 or 4 kids that were just put in there because it fit their timetable. So their motivation level is not the same as the other kids. And then again, as the school population declines, more and more that starts happening. And pretty soon it gets to the point where there's like hardly any athletes in there, and mainly kids who just, you know, are dumped or just see the title and take it. And there's no limitation in terms of, you know, who gets in and who doesn't. I get from guidance, your numbers aren't high enough in terms of your section, so you need to take on more kids, and then that completely changes the dynamic of what you're doing in there. So I guess the standard gets changed, and it's not really a high performance course anymore. It's, again, let's call it a higher level general fitness type of course. And you know, we kind of try to hang on as much as possible with that. But I think the map from the outset was decent. We were going to run, you know, from grades 10, 11, and 12. We combined, did everything I could to kind of keep the integrity of what we were doing. So by combining grade 10s, 11s, and 12s, I could still keep athlete population and show sections. But, you know, again, at a point in time, when the numbers continue to go down, that was just getting more and more difficult to do. So anyway, that's kind of how it went along.
How about outside of curriculum? Did you not have after-school training or anything like that, or did the extracurriculars always get in the way?
We would have off-season, like football was probably the lead in that kind of thing, because I mean, it was me. So when the season was over, either you're playing something else or you're lifting was the mentality. And we set up some stuff after school. Numbers were never great, not like, you know, sort of U.S. high school counterparts there, but it would, you know, some years good. It really depended on the group of kids we had as football players and how motivated they were, you know, from there, like way back in 90s up to about 2000, we had kids that lifted, lots of them. And then that would be, you know, kind of outside of the season, and that was beyond curriculum and all that kind of stuff. A lot of those kids didn't take phys courses, they just went in there. So it was there, but most recently we offered, you know, opportunity, and we supervised gym time and that kind of stuff, and kids just didn't show up. So they changed, you know, over time, and I think a lot of things changed, you know, over that time. The emphasis in high school sports changed, and that emphasis in high school sports became more of just running an activity as opposed to running program, and the community started to pick up. So the priority for kids was not their school team kind of thing and getting ready to be, you know, a varsity athlete. Their priority was to get ready for their club soccer or hockey or whatever the case was outside of school. And I think that what was happening at the time as well is, you know, everybody had a personal trainer. So that starts to, you know, leave. And again, and I think rightfully so, because, and I know it's probably a difference in public and Catholic philosophy, but in a public system, they're happy to run program, and that's it. You know, in school, out of school, nothing's more important than anything else. But we'll offer it, and that was always the thing. Like, you know, make sure we're running a badminton team, make sure we're running a curling team, make sure we're running these. Doesn't matter what they look like, but as long as we can, you know, when the grade 8 recruiting nights come around, we can say we offer, you know, 27 to 30 teams or whatever, then that's a selling point, you know, as opposed to you're running 30 credit programs, or you're running, you know, 20 decent programs kind of thing. And that's a change. And I mean, really, if a kid is looking to progress athletically, it's not going to happen in high school. I can't really think of the sport in high school where that if they were only participating in the high school sport, where they would really be in a situation to get any kind of, university opportunities or anything like that. Football might be the last one, but even now, like, if you're not playing summer ball, you're not at the top of the recruiting list. Now, guys still, recruit high schools, but most other sports, I can't think of any other sport where the prime sort of, I guess, let's call it scouting environment wasn't the club. Like basketball now, if they're not playing club or whatever, prep school kind of thing, they're not going to be playing CIS or scholarship basketball or whatever the case is. Hockey's, nobody's playing university level hockey or junior A or OHL or anything like that that's coming out of high school.
Yeah, so I made a comment. We're having a shop talk outside the CSCA. We have a podcast, and I made a comment about a race to the bottom in performance, sport performance at high schools. Is there any hope in the next decade that sport performance will become more of a priority in the public school or Catholic school system, or do you think it's going to become even more participatory and more, what's the word for it, less emphasis on achievement and more on participation?
I think that's the path. It's going to be totally based on participation. And I had discussions before I retired that we should really sit down and review what we're offering and why we're offering it, because there's money involved in offering programs, but there's all kinds of pieces that we can't address. So we don't have huge coaching commitments like we did. Nobody's going 5 days, 6 days a week anymore. Our kids are not committed either. They work 2 to 3 days a week. You're trying to figure out practice schedules based on kids working. The kids aren't, it's not the other way around. So I think that becomes more and more and more. And then in that sense, I said it does need to become more participatory, because then you get kids out and, they're happy, they're part of the school, that kind of stuff. The motive's different. High performance and all that kind of stuff in a higher standard doesn't belong there anymore. I'm saying that I felt that near the end. I thought we wasted a lot of resources and arguments and that kind of stuff trying to, do something that doesn't exist. The place where there's any emphasis on excellence and performance is in the community. So, age group wise, for sure, but it's going to be in the community. It's not going to be in the schools. Catholics will try and hang on as long as they can. But other than that, maybe the private schools and then the odd sort of sport academy type schools, but they're taking in a number of kids and they're specialized. But from a public school standpoint, everyone's happy if, they kind of get to put on a uniform, and that's about it. And they really don't care. Again, I don't think they care what that looks like. So if you can report this many kids are playing, then that's better than this many kids are excelling, kind of thing. So I don't see it, in the next 10 years that things are going to change in that sense, that it's going to all of a sudden become, high standard performance based at all. Not my opinion anyway.
So if you're an undergrad and you're interested in strength conditioning, but you're also interested in influencing youth athletics, youth performance, maybe you have something like a coachable, and you want to bring strength conditioning to schools because most schools don't have anything formalized, is it a lost cause, or can you still champion it similar to what you did?
I think you can, but it's you've got to be in the system, and I think you've got to be at a point where you can, you're able to make a commitment to doing it. So if you're in your first 5 years of teaching, you're trying to hang on to your job, as a, opposed to trying to, create programs, and that you're taking whatever you get.
As the Canadian Strength Conditioning Association, our job is to advocate for strength conditioning and performance training services in all age groups for the purpose of enhancing sport performance. Youth sport is obviously the major target. If we compare ourselves to high schools and middle schools in the US, middle schools, when I was in Texas, my son was on the football team in grade 7. Grade 7 had 3 different football teams. Grade 8 had 4 different, so they fielded 4 different football teams. And they started lifting weights in grade 7. So it's interesting. This is what we're trying to visualize. Can anything like exists in the US ever exist in Canada? And it sounds like we're moving towards the position of probably not, which looks like we're moving more towards that European model where everything's becoming club sport oriented, and then things like Own the Podium, Amateur Sport, Quest for Golds, Canadian Sports Institutes kind of take over a lot of that performance side of things. And anyway, sorry, I was just filling the interlude.
I'm back.
You're back. Good.
All right.
So anyway, so this young kid, they can get in first 5 years. They've just got to keep their job. If they move their way up to department head, or they become buddies with the department head and the principal's their best friend, all that kind of thing, and they say, okay, I want to start my own little weight room, is it worth doing? Or are you gonna
I guess kind of a different perspective on that is, do whatever you can to make yourself valuable and make it hard for people to let you go, or at least have administrators vouch for you when it comes time to determine staffing and that kind of stuff. So there is a value from a personal sense, and if you start something and then it's up to, so I'm saying 5 years because it's kind of when you're most vulnerable to getting bounced from school to school. But if you're bringing, that kind of a resume every time, someone may bring you over because they know you could do that, and they may want it in their school and those kind of things. So I don't think it's a complete lost cause. I just think, and I just saw this from young teachers. You don't like seeing them get frustrated because, they do something and they take ownership of it, and then it gets taken away through no fault of their own. And they're saddened by that. Oh, what am I doing here? And that kind of thing, and go from there. And again, I think we talked about this example. So we had a young teacher, and she built up a dance program, and she went like 5 days a week. This was an exception in terms of a teacher. 5 days a week, 6 days a week, built this thing up, got a ton of kids involved, extracurricular dance program, with the hopes of that she could pose, developing some courses, because there is curriculum. So she did have those pieces. And then she kind of built the foundation outside the classroom to hope those kids would take the course. Well, when it came time to have those discussions about staffing, it was brought up, and then, and this is me, I said, you are going to create a program for someone that can't be here because of our hiring practices. So yes, maybe they could have brought in that program, and they might have got 2 sections, but I knew right away there were 2 other girls from other schools that were kind of ahead of her in terms of seniority that could easily teach dance. So she did all that work, and she would not have a sniff, to getting those sections or that job. And I think that situation relates to sort of trying to put together strength conditioning program. And if you can't kind of control your own destiny career-wise, you're definitely not going to control the program. It's not like you would build a strength conditioning program and then you stay at the school because of its value or whatever, because you easily say, well, he could do it, she could do it, whoever could teach it, kind of thing. So it's a tough road, I think, on the front end. But again, sort of as you move forward, if you're, in a position where you can start to dictate your own destiny, i.e., become a department head, now it's more realistic, because the other thing that happens when you're a department head, you're protected on the seniority list. So, those kind of mechanics or logistics or whatever you want to call them, they get in the way, and I don't think people always, are aware of the restrictions. So, like, I would recommend to try and hire somebody, and that goes on deaf ears because principal shows me the list of the 5 people that they're going to interview, and I can't add people to that list, and that list is coming off, or those people are coming off a list at the board that ranks their seniority and their qualification, and away you go from there. So you're choosing from that 5, and that 5 is based on seniority, nothing else.
So the provincial government just announced the changes in the seniority rules for hiring. Will that impact that?
I would think so, because they're trying to go to more
merit-based or skill-based?
Merit-based. And again, I still don't know how you can put
Still
that
have the
into
same
the
problems, probably. Some of the same problems.
I think, because I don't think you can go merit-based and hire someone on, a resume that's been built over 1 year, kind of, or someone who's been out of teachers college for 1 or 2 years, kind of thing, and then they have a great resume, but I don't think that'll jump. It might allow for more internal sort of manipulation or whatever you want to call it, but I think it would allow for more internal type of pieces to be moved around, and then you could look further than that 5 and add some stuff that's merit-based and go from there. But I don't think they've opened the door to 100% say that that person that's been here for 10 years is not going to have a job over that person that came out of teachers college. So I don't think you're there yet. And it's kind of stupid how it came to this, because it was not to say knee-jerk reaction, but you had some nepotism going on, and the next thing you do is you go the other way and completely wipe out any kind of merit-based hiring practice because of a small section of nepotism type of hiring, and
new problem.
overkill. So completely overkill.
What about if we had more physical educators that were more in tune with what performance training is and how to coach it? So do you see a trend in kinesiology education where more recent grads are more attuned to how to coach kids in the weight room? Do you think schools are doing a better job of that?
I think it depends. I saw when I took on any sort of student teacher candidates, I liked the kids I would get from Brock. They were, very well founded in a lot, like just from, teaching acumen, initiative, independence, all those kind of things. And most of them, like if you've gotten someone that's a full phys ed, and they run that concurrent program there for that in teaching. I thought those prospective teachers had pretty decent skill base and could, kind of bring that with them. I don't really see a ton of it. You see the odd person who's kind of spent some time, getting a personal trainer certificate. Very rarely did I see anyone who was, NSCA type certified or anything like that. So, is some, and I think it really depended on the school in terms of the kids we brought. I think it's an area that should be included because that's enough in terms of change in the curriculum or the way it's delivered. There's a lot less of, 2 weeks of basketball, 2 weeks of volleyball, that kind of thing. Everybody's putting a fitness component to those pieces, an activity component, get your heart rate up, whatever the case is. And I think that should expand to strength conditioning. So I really think having those candidates, gain those kind of competencies coming in is definitely it's going to help. If everybody was, sound strength conditioning practice, that will infiltrate, into the way they deliver their program, I think, as teachers. And then that's kind of where it picks up. And again, with the caveat that you're doing this for curriculum purposes, not outside. Like, you're going to get some kids that'll take a course, like that high performance course. A lot of those kids that took it in the early days were kids that were engaged in club sports outside. And I think that's the kind of, I guess, direction it should have is build a program, build a curriculum, build courses that will sort of bring that type of student into your classroom. And then what they do, after school is kind of their thing. And that's kind of, sort of from the school system piece where it belongs. I don't see, based on the trends in the extracurricular in sports, that you would really develop strength conditioning outside. Like, you're not getting athletes that really care much, beyond like getting together with their friends and then doing. But there are kids in your school that are involved in community sports.
Yeah.
So again, if you're in the classroom doing that, I think there's a benefit there. I think you're banging your head against the wall if you're going to think you're going to develop a program outside.
And what role does OFIA play in all of this? So OFIA, Ontario Physical Health Educators Association, helps establish curriculum guidelines and safety guidelines for implementation of physical education curriculum in elementary and high schools. I'm always a little bit critical of them because they've completely whitewashed the strength conditioning side of things, or resistance training or fitness side of things. It's super general guidelines, overly safety conscious. Is there any change that could happen at the OFIA level to help encourage better training practices, whether it's just in fitness and or strength conditioning in the school system?
It depends, I guess, on what you think is the sort of the support or benefit. Like, they're very good at putting out policy. They can put out a whole bunch of, new safety guidelines and parameters by which you should work. And again, there's an importance to doing that, but at the same time, you can't continue to create more and more policy and legislation that discourages, people from doing things. And that's where I think, it would be a tough call. It's important in the schools because the schools get, sued on a regular basis. So, OFIA is a good thing for the schools in the sense that they create that sort of cover your ass kind of setup, and and you have that, right? And I mean, my last 15 years, it was just hammered of FIA safety guidelines, and every incident would turn into 10 more new guidelines, and then it's tough to operate that way. Like you get very anxious about how you're delivering your program. And not that you shouldn't be aware of safety or anything like that, but again, like, we had a wind policy created because, a kid walked under a tree and went through a field, and the branch snapped and hit the kid. And I don't know if the kid died or was injured pretty badly, but now all of a sudden you can't participate in sports when, you reach a certain, wind speed outside. Well, that's a blanket kind of piece. You can run around on a track when it's, a certain km per hour of wind. All it does is provide you resistance. And, some sports you're fine playing, in that. Like, it became a lot of those. It gets too hot, you can't play. We shut everything down and on from there. And, it's like it's overly protective. So I think it's like the 40 degrees or 38. I can't remember the exact number. Maybe 38 degrees Celsius, and you can't have games. You got to shut everything down. As opposed to make sure you got enough, water and shade on the sideline, and then we're talking about like an hour of game, or maybe 90 minutes if we're looking at soccer or something like that. It can be done, and I know that I guess there's the piece. We don't have all the support mechanisms in place to, make it safe as it should be. But again, like I find.
I don't know what you define as a safe sport, because you move and you're at risk, right? So it's you cannot legislate everything. So again, it's a bit of a race to the bottom. What do you think? So in our efforts to be safe and inclusive, what's happening though is we're creating an environment where any individual who's interested in performing or excelling in sport no longer can be included in the school system. So we're pushing people out into the amateur sport club sports setting. So we're removing inclusivity from the high schools. We're pushing it into elitism and a situation where only the rich kids can participate. Is that true? Is that what's going to happen? Because
I think that's a side effect. The one thing I always thought was great about high school sports is, it's inclusive, it's cheap. And it offers something, but that's a dilemma. Like, they still, and you mentioned it earlier, it's a European model. We're kind of caught, I think, in between. I know, where we're located, there's lots of U.S. influence, but the way we operate is more European than it is American. We try to do American, but we do it without the resources or the money. So, yes, and I think that's a big fear kind of moving forward with coming out of COVID and always work to rules and all this kind of stuff is more and more reason not to do anything extracurricular in a high school and just focus on school. And then you're absolutely right. What's the consequence of that is you have to be involved in community sport. If you're involved in community sport, you pay a whack of money to participate. And it's not about talent level anymore or excellence. It's about who can pay and who can. And there's tons of examples of that. That is a concern. I think that's a concern, like big picture, that's a concern in Canada because we don't have a ton of athletes. So, if you create barriers because of finances, we can't reach the level of excellence that we want. You have to have kids. You have to have athletes. And if you don't have athletes because of finances, you know, to me, that's a sad piece. And again, kind of contrary to the whole concept of you know, participation, those kind of things. But that's my biggest concern coming out of COVID. Everybody's going to jack their registration fees. You know, that everyone's going to want to make up for, you know, lost funds and lost this and lost that. Or you're going to not get as many kids coming back to sport, which I'm already seeing it in this club swimming that I'm involved in. So they raise the rates, they offer less program, and it's going to, you know, filter through. There's going to be, you know, parents paying more money to get less program. I'll look somewhere else. But, you know, I think that's a huge danger or fear, I guess, moving forward. I don't see any sport that I'm involved with right now where the fees are going to stay the same or go down. They definitely won't go down. You know, and that, again, it just pushes towards that whole, you know, elitism, but it's elitism by you know, income. And I don't think that's the way it should, you know, it should work.
Yeah, and well,
you know, at least
when it comes to strength and conditioning, it's even more expensive. So now you're paying for your sport, and then you're going to pay for strength conditioning. I know in the GPA, I've done the math on it. If you want to move all strength conditioning performance training private, you know, you're talking $120 to $160 a month minimum if you want to cover lease costs, employee costs, and operational costs. 140, 150 a month. That's $1,700 a year. Taxes in.
Yeah.
So it's moving everything away from inclusivity. It's moving everything towards exclusivity and putting up barriers to kids accessing not just performance but health and lifelong lifelong sport involvement.
So I always thought, like, to me, that was the importance of high school in providing the opportunity. So, you know, is it better to offer this program that's participatory in nature, and allow kids to, you know, play some and be involved in sport to a point, or, you know, again, you can't have the same thing happen in high school and you know, create program. The high school's different in the sense that if I ask a kid to make a 5 or 6 day a week commitment, then I'll lose the kid. You know, if it came to football, I spent the last 10 years trying to figure out when is the best time to run practice and it won't conflict with work and you know, coming up with all kinds of ways to counter all the excuses that were coming up. So makes it difficult. So do I want to run a program on, you know, less commitment, or do I want to have more kids and go that way kind of thing? Like if I had the same expectations, I know it's old man talking, but if I had the same expectations I had 20 years earlier to a football program, that I wouldn't have a football program today. So, you know, that's something you got to kind of consider. But I think you got to come to terms with that in your mind. Like, I know that was a frustration for me, was I don't want to keep watering down, you know, and offering less and expecting less and those kind of things. And I think that becomes a concern. Like, you know, in the end, again, you know, what do you want after 4 years of high school, 5 years of high school? What do you want them to come out with? I want kids to have expectations for themselves. You know, I want them to go through and commit and say that, you know, if I miss a practice or if I miss a training session, it's not good. You know, like, you want that sort of mindset. No, well, I'll get it tomorrow, you know, or I'll get it another day or whatever kind of thing. I just think, you know, it's tough. You lower the bar, that's where they go. You raise the bar and they reach for they reach up for the bar. It's just like it really is about where you set the standards and where you set the expectations. So I
see the same thing at university for sure. So if I can interrupt, what is the answer if we want to develop performance in schools to develop these high skills majors type situations or athlete centric, like the Bill Carruthers things, or what they've done at Westmount or Jacob Hespler, or, you know, obviously we know the private schools, we won't deal with Upper Canada College or the Vancouver colleges, that kind of thing. But within the school system, if you have a group of individuals who want to champion it, is a more sustainable solution to develop some of these athlete-centric programs, or are those even sustainable? Question mark.
I think those are gonna. I'm not, you know, completely aware of how things operate at Carruthers, but Westmount, I have a bit of an idea there. I don't see it as sustainable, and I don't see it as something that's going to be acceptable, actually, because there's so much inequity. And I know, you know, within Halton, with Hamilton, if you go from school to school and look at, you know, facility, resources, those kind of things, there's too much inequity to, I guess, funnel resources to one place and offer these, you know, we'll call them elite opportunities, versus, you know, these guys are you know, working on a, you know, a universal gym that's 40 years old or whatever, and that might be an exaggeration, but a lot of schools don't have facilities that one school has, and then it gets into the hands of administrators and it moves up. Like, there's already, you know, situations, and this is happening in Burlington now. The whole fundraising piece is being examined. So you've got Nelson, that was a very good fundraiser and lives in an area where they seem to do really well fundraising, and a lot of the other schools don't have those opportunities. So they're looking at basically putting a cap on what Nelson can do because it's a disadvantage to the others. So, you know, how do you deal with that? I'm not sure. Like,
so,
you know,
so if we can't all be rich, we all must be poor. That sounds kind of socialist, right?
Yes, and I, you know, but I experienced that as a coach, you know, when I was at Mac. You know, there's your Laval, and they're doing things at a whole new level and kind of trailblazing and that kind of thing. And there were some coaches, you know, that thought we need to get to that. There were a lot of coaches that thought we need to bring that back down. Like, that's, you know, that, you know, bringing them back to mediocrity.
So we got to penalize them.
You can't, right. And so, you know, I think you kind of would get that, but, you know, we're talking public school system and tax dollars and all that kind of stuff. And again, like, if I'm just looking at different perspectives here, but if you're a parent and your kid goes to a school that has a classroom as a fitness center, you must be asking, how did they get the money, or, you know, to build a fitness center at that level? My kid doesn't have that. Like, a lot of things go along with it too, in terms of inequities. Like, the opportunities you get when you go to Westmount are not the opportunities you get if you went to Sherwood or if you went to Churchill or something like that. So can you justify that, you know, like, and on what basis, sort of thing. So I don't know, in the sense of, can you build something? You can build it, and then the sustainability part is probably the bigger question. I think you can always build it, you can always partner, and I think those pieces are always there, but you can't control how a board administrator or whatever is going to continue on with those kind of things. So, you know, in Halton, we had a cycle of 5 years max for an administrator. Well, every 5 years, your school has a new direction, a new philosophy, and that kind of thing. So if you have, an administrator that, looks at things and says everything's got to be equitable, regardless, not look at, situations independently, then, you might lose program that year. Or you have the other, see the other side. The principal gives carte blanche. What do you need? What do you want? They don't ask questions. But, again, there's no regularity to that. It's the exact opposite. You're always, dependent on the individual that's doing things. Even with this, the strength program. Like, I had that situation in my school. I had a guy, who I taught, mentored, was into strength conditioning, following along the path, and go, well, I can go anytime now. Well, they went before I did. So now all of a sudden, the person you have in place to continue on is gone, and like, I couldn't hire anybody, to fill those positions, or at least maintain that program. They're somewhere else, kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of, I guess, moving parts to trying to create a sustainable program. If you're talking about putting something together for a few years, sure.
So I know that schools sometimes bring in private partners to help operate their system. So in Hamilton, they brought in McMaster to help them run some of their athlete performance stuff. I know that schools bring in climbing gyms, and they set up portable climbing gyms and things like that. There's funding available for some of these external partnerships.
Yep.
Is there any potential there for a public-private partnership with strength conditioning and school boards where there could be somewhat quasi-equitable distribution? Like, there could be maybe a discount rate. We do user fees all the time for sport, where you implement a user fee, and it's very affordable though, and for $40 a month, a kid can actually get some training.
I think, like, at one time you could, in the sense that, and I did it for exposure. When I ran that course, and I would, put out some feelers to the community. Can we bring these kids here for a week? Whatever gym or fitness center would take the kids on, and they'd go to that place, for a week, and kind of be immersed in their programs, and go from there. So those little pieces. I know that we've put out money for bringing in martial arts people to teach girls self-defense. And again, it all depends on the teacher. And if the teacher's kind of willing to, basically get after the principal to get the funds and those kind of things, and they can kind of make it happen, and you can come up with rationale and that kind of thing. So yeah, is it probably possible? I don't know if it's possible to create a position. There might be, but when, and this is in Halton, when there is, debate going on whether or not to keep the curriculum coordinator for phys ed,
Really?
then are you going to be able to hire, let's say, a resident strength conditioning person, let's say, to go around to all the schools? They'd be on contract, and they'd be susceptible to whatever the budget says that year, kind of thing. They've got a contract to go, and I don't know if that's not sustainable. It's doable, it's not sustainable.
I just look at, we often rent out swimming pools. High schools will rent out hockey arenas for their teams. If you could have for fitness programming or performance program, whatever you want, and you're in a city where there's 6 different schools like Burlington, and each school had a month of programming done off-site at these centers as part of their curriculum. would that work? Could they go off site for 2 days a week, 2 mornings a week and do it, or is that mess with the timetable too much?
Yeah.
Not likely.
I think it's possible, and that's like your model at Westmount, right? They're down at Mac for a couple days a week.
Yeah.
Those guys run the program that costs money.
Yeah.
I don't know if, what max rates are relative to, what could be offered by a community facility,
Okay.
let's say.
Private facilities, the problem with
Definitely, it's totally doable. But then again, like, and I hate to continuously bring up, and that now, you mentioned OFIA and all those kind of things. So, driving policies, like kids driving. I don't know that you would get the funding to provide busing, let's say, to get kids there and back. Westmount does. I don't know, what that arrangement is, but in our case, it would be students driving or having their parents driving, kind of thing, to a place. And if it's students driving, even if it's parents driving, there's 4 or 5 sheets you got to fill out to be able to drive other kids. Your insurance piece, then criminal record checks, all this kind of stuff. To drive a kid, 5 minutes away, let's say, and back, and so again, is it doable? Yeah. Are you willing to go through the hassle? I don't know. In that sense, you could set it up. I think it could be set up fairly easily. I think you could always arrange financially a pretty good deal with the community, fitness center, private fitness center. I know you can do that. You get a better rate, you get a decent rate, but then all the other pieces have to be in place. And that's, as soon as you leave campus, you're into a whole whack of, other sort of policy type issues. And if you want to go through that, and some people have no problem going through that, then I think you can run it, but it's individually based. I think that much. You're not going to get, I don't think you would get, let's say, a whole board buy-in, but if you have that enthusiastic individual that wants to do that, sure, I think that's a possibility and a definite. I don't think it would turn into a board-wide thing.
Yeah. Well,
but I could be wrong.
You've certainly given us some stark realities today, my man. It's I've been in this business a long time, and one of my major motivations is to develop youth performance. Youth performance is a key. If we can capture them young and train them throughout their adolescence, we can create phenomenal athletes no matter what their sport is, if we can capture them. But the big trick seems to be able to capture these populations, and it seems to become harder as years go on. But as strength conditioning moves more into the private sphere, the question is, how do you monetize that, be able to keep your doors open and keep people flowing through it from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m. instead of just from 5 till 9 p.m. as the model currently exists. So, yeah. I don't know. There could be some opportunities that are one-offs here and there. I don't think there's an easy answer that you've come up with that will guide people in one direction or another. Any last thoughts before we pack this in to inspire young strength conditioning coaches coming out of undergrad who want to work with youth as to what direction to go with it?
I think I think we, all of us, need to review and get a better understanding of where things are going and really what are the organizations and those things. And community sports is huge. And to me, and what I've seen is there's a trend towards providing that piece that it fits too, because as much as, you're promoting elitism, whatever, but it seems everybody's willing to pay. And I think without factoring in costs, I think the place to be in terms of growing and expanding the strength conditioning and providing programming and developing athletes is within the community. And if you're going to try and do it from the school, I think you need to have a relationship with the community, you know, and I think that's probably a path is, you know, the schools can be flexible in that sense that if I have a kid or student who is a, you know, AAA hockey player, you know, in his draft year or whatever, there's nothing that says I can't speak with the AAA hockey coach and develop, you know, an independent or individual type, you know, program for that athlete. And you know, I've talked to my wife, but she's at Westmount about this. I think that's kind of the next step for Westmount is to, they have a lot of those kids. They're not necessarily school sport kids, not their main center, but develop the relationship within the community and work with them, you know, hand in hand with that athlete. I mean, it's this, you know, probably it's the Bill Carruthers model in a sense, but, you know, develop that relationship. And then I think there's value and importance in the community, I think would also get the perception that there's more value in the school being provided as well. If, you know, you can provide, you know, decent program and monitoring for that kid for the things they're doing outside of school, within the school. So now it's that whole, you know, getting credit for participating in sports outside of school, but they're following this program within school. So I think everybody's happy in that sense,
Yeah.
you know, and you can develop within and I think, you know, with
US, like when I was in the US,
situation,
when I was in the US, we could get credit, my kids could get credit for being in high performance sport in the club level, assuming that they're practicing or
right,
competing 6 days a week, X number of hours,
yes,
logbook, you know, and that kind of thing. So that can
yeah.
be an easy way to direct energies and resources as well.
They have those exceptions, I guess, for kids that are involved in high performance. They're within like school board policy or documentation. You can, but people don't know about it, for one. But I guess it's like, you know, the sense that they could challenge the credit kind of thing. You could get a credit again if you're showing that you're committed this many hours, you're fulfilling A, B, and C pieces of curriculum. The only, I guess, part to figure out would be the health piece, but I mean, you're talking about 14 days worth. That can be done easily online, you know, but again, I think that has never really been exploited much, that clause there, and it should be. But again, it's the reaching out, and I think it shows greater value from the school end if you're doing it for the individual as opposed to, you know, we're bringing everybody down and everybody's going to do the same old, yeah, cookie cutter piece. Well, cookie cutter piece, you know, for a swimmer and for, you know, a basketball player, you know, the molds don't fit kind of thing. And I think that's, again, next step. So you've got this relationship established, and I think you need to go a step further and really make it, you know, individualized and specific to the athlete. And I think you've got something, and I think that can be done within the school framework.
Perfect. All right, my man. So as you enter your 60th year, that was a great chance to reflect on the past and the future of strength conditioning. Thanks again for your time. there'll be a variety of different articles. There's a variety of different interviews and some written pieces that will be coming out in this newsletter. So I invite anybody watching this to look at all the different viewpoints. Most of it's largely Ontario-centric, and my apologies for those out east and west, just because we had a pool of individuals that jumped on board right away to do it. I know we've had some representation from out east-west, but I'm looking forward to hearing back from people out east and west as to their experiences and if they have a better solution to some of the problems we may have here in Ontario. So Campy, enjoy your birthday, blow out some candles for me, and I'm sure we'll talk soon. We'll let you know if any comments come through and people want to reach out to you. Take care of yourself, my man.
All right.